Hi everyone. The purpose of this video is going to help you understand how to use AWARE in collaboration with the recent Lead Forward training for intentional interventions. So I'm going to kind of refresh your memory if you attended that training with Shelby, where she talked about ways to make intervention at the Tier 1 level more meaningful and more intentional. I'm going to do a refresher on that, and then I'm going to show you the tool that we have in AWARE that will help you do just that she talked about, and then we will kind of walk through the steps of what to do once you have access to the tool. Okay, so reminding you what Shelby was talking about from the Leading Intentional Intervention training, she talked to the ways that we sometimes consider students who are in need of intervention. So just basic looking at data, oftentimes we consider our different quintiles and we consider our students' raw scores, and more often than not, we usually think that it's these students who didn't pass the assessment who are in need of tutorials or Tier 2 intervention, and those that pass the assessment perhaps need little or no intervention. And so Shelby talked about a way that we really need to use the peaks in conjunction with the question number to identify the students who are in need of intervention for particular concepts. So taking that in consideration, this model here that she showed at the training shows not only the raw score for the overall assessment that was being considered, but the questions that address this particular standard for 8th grade science. You can tell by looking by question which students missed these questions and which students got some correct, all correct, and so on. So when we look at it from this perspective and we consider the students who actually need intervention, actually down here in quintiles 1, 2, and 3, we have several students that when we look question by question who got all of the questions or 2 out of 3 questions right. So in taking that into consideration, those students really aren't in need of intervention for this particular standard. However, the students highlighted in yellow, these students missed either 2 or 3 of the questions related to this particular standard. And so those are the students who we really need to intervene with for this particular standard. That's not to say that the kids here in quintiles 1, 2, and 3 aren't in need of intervention, but it just might not be this particular standard that these kids highlighted green in these lower quintiles need intervention on. Okay, we're going to go into AWARE now, and I'm going to show you the tool that will be helpful. Okay, and I'm going to use the demo site, so what you see here on my screen could look a little different than yours, but this tool is accessible through your same view. So once you've logged into AWARE, we're going to be here on the Analyze tab. Depending on your grade level, you may want to access by class period. If you're an elementary teacher, you probably want to access by clicking on All My Students. But whatever your preference is, you're going to locate an assessment, whether it's a benchmark assessment, a recent campus-based assessment, either one of those, this will work for. Because I'm in the demo site, I do have to click on Star Test because that's all I have access to. I'm going to drill down to my test. Okay, so there's my assessment. And just having the student scores doesn't give me enough information to plan for intentional intervention. So when I do my drop down for my menu of quick views, down here at the bottom, we've created a template for you that says Lead Forward Intentional Intervention. So if you were to open that, okay, it will apply for you the fields that you will need in order to be able to do what Shelby modeled for you at her training. All right, before we can use this to actually plan for intentional intervention, I would like for you to consider sorting the data in a way that it will represent it sort of like the quintiles that we were talking to before. So what I would like for you to do is single click on percent score. Okay, and when you do that, the data are sorted from lowest to highest percent score. If you single click that again, we're going to get it from highest to lowest. And this is going to have the data looking like it looked on the previous PowerPoint that I was showing you, where your quintile 5 kids are listed at the top and quintile 1 at the bottom. You can do it in any order that you prefer, but I'm just trying to model for you the way it was shown at the training. So now you're going to go ahead and export this to Excel. And once you do that, open up your Excel file. I always have to click Enable Editing. Don't forget to do that if yours has this yellow bar at the top. And it really doesn't need a lot of cleaning per se, but if you notice the teaks are kind of scrunched up here, if you just double click between the 2 rows where the teaks are located, that's going to open those up for you. When it cooperates, it's our best friend. Oh, goodness, let me just drag it. All right, that one wanted me to drag it. So if you have problems like I just did, it's a very real thing. If double clicking doesn't work, then of course you can just hover between the 2 rows and drag to the height that you need that row to actually show the teaks that are hidden in there. Okay? All right, so taking a look at what we have here. So we have our student names, we have their raw score, their percent score, the question number across the top. This is the reporting category. Here are the standards by readiness and supporting. And then this particular assessment that I opted to pull out has processing standards listed too, but we're not really going to pay particular attention to those for the purpose of this video. What we want to take into consideration are these readiness standards and supporting standards listed across the top. So the first thing that you have to kind of identify is which standard am I going to plan meaningful intervention for? So for example, if I wanted to take into consideration this 4-5D, I want to find all of the spots where 4-5D was tested. So each question that's aligned to 4-5D. So kind of starting from the beginning, it doesn't look like before question 8 there were any. So I'm actually going to click on column E, and I'm going to highlight all the way to the column right up before 4-5D. While I'm here in the top where it says E, I'm going to right click and I'm going to opt to hide those columns. Okay, so now it starts with 4-5D. Now I want to consider, where does 4-5D occur again? And it occurs again at question number 17. So I'm going to start in the column after question 8, and I'm going to go all the way up until 4-5D again. I'm going to right click, I'm going to hide, and I'm going to continue repeating this process until I have basically hidden all of the questions that are not related to 4-5D. This process goes a little faster if you actually have an answer key in front of you that indicates which questions we're assessing, which particular standards. Because I'm using the demo site, I'm not fortunate enough to have that answer key. You will have your answer keys in front of you, so you will be able to check them off the list much faster than I am. Looks like I found all my 4-5Ds. Looks like there's 3 of them in total. So again, I'm just highlighting all the ones that are not 4-5D and hiding them. All right, so now what I have on my screen looks very similar to what Shelby showed us at the intentional intervention training. Now I can see my students line by line, and I can quickly identify who it is that got all of the questions right pertaining to this particular standard. And if I go on down, here's a student who actually missed 2 out of 3. So that could be a student that I consider for intentional intervention. These kids that missed 1, I can tell just by looking at this question, they all chose B. So that's a real quick question I can go over with a small group of kids. If it's my whole class, there's clearly a distractor or something in this question. Maybe it was a multi-step problem and they stopped too soon, because I am looking at a math test. So those are just real easy things to quick fix it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to delve into intervention with those kids. So going on down, you can see it's real easy to find my kids who did miss more than one question for this particular standard, and those are my kids that I'm going to need to identify for intentional intervention according to the training. So when you're finished planning for intervention for this particular standard, you still have your other standards to consider. So you're going to need to unhide your cells and repeat the process for hiding for the next standard. So to unhide your cells, I'm going to click before, like I'm just going to click on %4, column D, something that wasn't part of the whole hiding process. And I'm just going to highlight over to where I don't have any data. And I'm going to right click, and this time I'm going to opt to unhide. And when I do, it opens my Excel file back up to the original way that it looked. So then I would just repeat the process. I would find my next standard that I want to focus on. Maybe it's this 4.2G. And I would go along and I would highlight the cells that are not pertaining to 4.2G. Looks like it goes all the way up to there. Right click, hide. And so now I've got two questions side by side, number 1 and number 22, that relate to 4.2G. Continue that process. Looks like this time I'm going up to question 36. I'm going to hide those. Do a quick check. Usually there's not more than 3. But it's possible if it's your common assessment, you could have more than 3. So again, highlight and hide. And now I'm ready to plan for intentional intervention based on 4.2G. Okay. And as I'm looking through the list for this pretend data that I have, this one actually looks pretty good. It doesn't look like I have a lot of need for intervention on this standard. So I would just continue going through my list to figure out where I do have, oh, there we go. There's some. So down here, I do have some students who missed more than one question on this particular standard. Okay, so that's about it for this how-to video. If you need additional support in actually planning for intentional intervention, please reach out to your curriculum and instructional specialist. They are happy to help. Their website is full of great ideas for intervention resources. If you need help with the data itself and actually how do I find it in Aware, how do I do the formatting that you were talking about, my name is Tiffany Arce. Please reach out and I will be happy to help. Thanks and have a great day.